The mist, a living shroud, always found its way to Blackwood Manor. It wasn't the gentle, romantic wisps of a country morning, but a thick, clawing entity that seeped through stone and glass, bringing with it the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else, something ancient and hungry. Elias Thorne, a man who believed only in the quantifiable, found himself increasingly battling its psychological encroachment. He had inherited Blackwood Manor from a great-aunt he barely remembered, a spinster known for her eccentricities and her fierce, almost possessive love for the dilapidated estate. The will stipulated that Elias must reside there for at least 6 months before he could sell it. A simple enough condition, he had thought, exchanging his sleek city apartment for the oppressive grandeur of a place that felt perpetually on the cusp of collapse. His first week was a blur of dust sheets, rattling windows, and the unnerving creak of ancient timbers. The manor was vast, too vast for a single man, with labyrinthine corridors that twisted into unexpected cul-de-sacs and rooms filled with forgotten relics. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the mist would roll in from the surrounding moors, swallowing the manor whole. It brought with it an amplified silence, broken only by the mournful hoot of an owl or the skittering of unseen creatures in the walls. Elias, a forensic accountant by trade, prided himself on his meticulous nature, his sharp, rational mind. But Blackwood Manor began to chip away at his composure. It started subtly. A door he swore he'd left ajar would be closed. The faint smell of violets, a scent he associated with his great-aunt, would waft through a room, only to vanish moments later. He dismissed these occurrences as tricks of the old house, the drafts and echoes playing havoc with his senses. Then came the whispers. At first, he thought it was the wind, whistling through loose panes or sighing down the chimneys. But the whispers weren't formless. They were low, sibilant, like dry leaves rustling across a gravestone. They seemed to emanate from the very fabric of the house, from the stone walls, the polished floorboards, even the heavy velvet curtains. He'd pause his reading, straining to hear, but they would always recede just beyond the grasp of clear understanding, leaving only a lingering chill. One night, a storm raged across the moors, rattling the manor to its foundations. Elias was in the library, trying to distract himself with an old, leather-bound volume on local folklore he'd found tucked away. The wind howled like a banshee, and the rain lashed against the windows, a drumming cacophony. Suddenly, a whisper cut through the din, clear and distinct, right beside his ear. "He watches." Elias dropped the book, his heart leaping into his throat. He spun around, his eyes darting into the shadowed corners of the room. Nothing, only the storm, the dust motes dancing in the dim lamplight, and the oppressive silence that followed the word. His palms were slick with sweat. He told himself it was the wind, a trick of his tired mind, amplified by the Gothic setting. He wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, but the whispers grew bolder, more frequent. They spoke of things Elias couldn't comprehend, disjointed phrases, ancient names, and a pervasive sense of sorrow and despair. He found himself avoiding certain rooms, particularly the old master bedroom on the second floor, which seemed to be a focal point for the ethereal voices. The air in there was always colder, heavier, and the scent of violets was almost cloying. He tried to research the manor's history, hoping to find a rational explanation for the unsettling phenomena. The local archives were sparse, but he pieced together fragments. The manor had been built centuries ago on ancient land, once a site of pagan rituals. Generations of the Thorne family had lived and died within its walls, many meeting untimely ends, illness, accidents, and a disturbing number of unexplained disappearances on the moors. His great-aunt, it turned out, had spent her final years obsessed with the manor's secrets, often speaking of unseen presences and the old ones who dwelled in the mist. One afternoon, while exploring the forgotten East Wing, Elias stumbled upon a hidden door behind a tapestry. It led to a narrow, spiraling staircase, descending into utter darkness. A primal fear gripped him, but his rational curiosity, dulled by weeks of unease, pushed him forward. He lit his phone's flashlight and began to descend. The air grew heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. The staircase opened into a small, circular chamber, its walls carved with crude, ancient symbols. In the center, almost obscured by layers of dust, was a stone altar, and on the altar, etched into the rough stone, was the same symbol he'd seen carved into the old wooden desk in the library. A twisted, thorny vine forming an eye. A whisper, closer and more insistent than any before, snaked into his mind. He waits. Elias stumbled back, gasping for breath. The flashlight beam wavered in his trembling hand. He scrambled back up the stairs, the darkness behind him seeming to coalesce, to reach. He burst into the daylight of the manor, his heart pounding a furious rhythm against his ribs. He locked himself in the library, pacing frantically. The symbol, the whispers, his gray-tant's obsession. It wasn't just an old house. It was something else entirely. He remembered the folklore book, snatched it up, and flipped through its brittle pages. He found a section on local legends, tales of the Moor Shadow, an ancient entity said to dwell in the mist, feeding on fear and sorrow, worshipped by a long-forgotten cult. Its symbol was described as a thorny eye. A cold dread settled deep in Elias's bones. He wasn't just living in a haunted house, he was living in a trap. The 6-month stipulation. His gray-tant's secrets. Had she known? Had she been trying to warn him, or had she been drawn into its web herself? He began to notice new things, subtle shifts in the manor's atmosphere. The shadows deepened, seemed to move when he wasn't directly looking. Objects would shift positions when he left a room, only to be back where they started moments later. He saw fleeting reflections in polished surfaces that weren't his own. A gaunt, shadowy figure, its eyes burning with a malevolent light. The Moor Shadow. It was preparing him, feeding on his growing terror, growing stronger. Sleep became a luxury Elias could no longer afford. Every night, the whispers escalated into cacophonies, a chorus of despairing voices, sometimes punctuated by a low, guttural growl that resonated through the floorboards. He'd wake in a cold sweat, convinced he wasn't alone, that something was standing over him, watching. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere of the library, Elias ventured into the drawing room, a place he usually avoided due to its unsettling collection of antique dolls with vacant glass eyes. As he entered, a doll on the mantelpiece tilted its head, its porcelain face seeming to regard him with an unnerving intensity. The scent of violets was overwhelming. Then he heard it, not a whisper, but a clear, resonant voice, the voice of his great aunt. "Elias, you must leave. Now, before it consumes you, too." He froze, his blood turning to ice. His great aunt. He turned slowly towards the voice, his eyes fixed on the doll. Its glass eyes seemed to glimmer, reflecting the dying light. "Aunt Eleanor?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. The voice spoke again, strained, as if from a great distance. "It tried to keep me. It feeds on the despair of the living, the trapped. The manor, it is its cage, and its lure." A guttural growl ripped through the air, shaking the very foundations of the room. The dolls on the mantelpiece began to clatter, their small limbs twitching. The scent of decay, of something ancient and foul, suddenly overpowered the violets. "It knows I speak," his gray-tant's voice warned, now fading. "Run, Elias. The portal, the heart of it, below the old oak." The window behind the doll shattered inwards with a deafening crash, shards of glass exploding across the room. A black, swirling mist poured in, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape, tall, slender, with tendrils reaching out like grasping claws. 2 pinpricks of crimson light glowed within its depths, like hungry eyes. Elias didn't hesitate. The Moor Shadow. It wasn't just a legend. It was real, and it was furious. He knew with an absolute certainty that it was coming for him to drag him into the same torment his great aunt had endured. He fled, the chilling growl echoing behind him. He ran through the labyrinthine corridors, ignoring the whispers that now screamed his name, the phantom hands that seemed to claw at his clothes. He burst out of the manor's massive front door, into the clinging, suffocating mist. The darkness was absolute, the familiar path swallowed whole. He could hear the thrashing sound of the moor shadow pursuing him, the crunch of dead leaves under its unseen mass. His gray tant's last words echoed, "The portal, the heart of it, below the old oak." He remembered an ancient, gnarled oak tree on the edge of the property, its branches twisted like arthritic fingers. He stumbled forward, his lungs burning, his vision blurred by the mist and fear. Every step felt like wading through thick treacle. A colossal branch loomed suddenly out of the mist, striking him across the face. He fell, sprawling in the cold, wet earth. He scrambled to his feet, his hands stinging. His fingers brushed against something cold and smooth, a stone. He looked down. There, barely visible in the mist-shrouded ground, was a circle of ancient, unhewn stones, barely rising above the earth, their surfaces slick with moss. In the center of the circle, where the gnarled roots of the old oak converged, the ground pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. This was it, the portal, the heart. The growl behind him intensified, closer now, a guttural roar that vibrated through the very ground. The mist writhed and swirled, forming a colossal, indistinct shape, its crimson eyes burning through the gloom, just meters away. It was immense, terrifying, and its hunger was palpable. Elias knew he had only one chance. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, he lunged for the pulsing light. His hand plunged into the green glow, and an excruciating cold fire enveloped his arm. He felt something ancient and malevolent recoiling, screaming within the portal. The moor shadow shrieked, a sound that ripped through the air, vibrating through his very bones. The immense shape faltered, its tendrils flailing wildly. The crimson eyes dimmed, then vanished. The mist, for the first time since Elias arrived at Blackwood Manor, began to thin, to recede, revealing the dark, silent expanse of the moors. Elias stumbled back, pulling his hand free from the pulsing light. The circle of stones faded, the green glow extinguishing. The ground returned to normal, damp earth under the gnarled roots of the old oak. The silence that followed was profound, a blessed absence of whispers, growls, and despair. He looked back at Blackwood Manor, now a stark, skeletal silhouette against the emerging dawn, no longer shrouded in malevolent mist. It was still old, still imposing, but the oppressive, living dread that had permeated its walls was gone. The silence was truly silent. He didn't know what he had done, only that he had pushed something back, sealed something away. The 6-month stipulation no longer mattered. He would sell the manor, yes, but first, he would spend the remaining time making sure that the ancient circle remained undisturbed, that the portal remained closed. And he would never, ever forget the whisper of the moors, and the chilling truth of what lay beneath Blackwood Manor.